This field that I'm standing on was the location that marked the end of an era and the beginning of another. There was a time when the generic Earth was nothing but total anarchism. It was a time when nobody was in charge and was pretty much like that since the Stone Age. That was until January 1st, 1991, where the very renowned President Jackson B. Gerdes brutally killed his last enemy, and at that moment, anarchism would be no more. I am your host, Marcel Lidwell, and this is a generic society. The generic Earth is a massive planet, giving home to more than 116 million people. There is only one known country that rules the entire planet, called the United Generic Nations. It has a more ambiguous name, known as the Republic of Dundane, a reference to the nation's political capital, New Dundane. Here is where we will spend most of our time. 8 million generic people live, work, and maintain the sprawling city, a clear contrast to the world's anarchist days. The city of New Dundane, and the whole world for that matter, is under the leadership of President Gerdes. Gerdes is an independent, meaning he takes no sides when it comes to political parties. The concept of such parties boasting different ideologies is still an uncommon sight to come across. I remember my childhood very fondly. What was considered a regular day back then was you just mowing the field, raising your livestock, tending the crops. It was an average farm life. But there was always the chance that some weirdo would run into the fence with a hammer or whatnot and try to take your land. Anarchism is basically when no government is present, so you could just imagine how chaotic the place is when you can get away with anything, including murder. Oh yeah, anything. Gary Kether is an inventor who created the famous multi-purpose bot. The first of these robots were made out of scrap metal. They were intended to do a lot of the house chores in combat if necessary. Today, his creation has placed him in the president's good graces. The multi-purpose bots have undergone several modifications since then, but to the general public, it was just seen as an attraction. Gerdes wanted to make sure these robots would only be used for the most dangerous tasks. Multi-purpose bots, they do take a lot of work to maintain. Every robot requires a charging platform, a server to hold all their extra memory. Any small mistake could probably cause that robot to go off in a way. On top of that, you have the high cost. A multi-purpose bot with its essentials is around 20,000 generic units. Now, to a billionaire, to an oligarch, that isn't much, but to the average person, buying and maintaining a car is already a hole in your wallet. The only thing worse than a hole is 2 holes. Gerdes met with Kether in 1986, where his military came to the island that belonged to the Kingdom of Chent. As part of his military campaign, Gerdes persuaded the local leaders to join him and sacrifice their independence to ensure a safer future. King Alois Carnarvon accepted his offer with no resistance. Some say he did this out of fear and that Gerdes was just the lesser of two evils. Today, Chent is now a large city of its own, with a new name called Kether Chent, added in Gary Kether's honor. There are a total of 10 cities on the generic Earth. More than 99% of the population live in these dense urban and suburban zones. Each city is essentially like a state, making up a piece of the United Generic Nation. As a result, they are often known as city-state hybrids bearing a city hall, which also functions as a state capital. Outside the main entrances of each hangs the city-state hybrid's respective flag. The presence of the United Generic Nations flag above the state flag is assigned by Gerdes to not be too excited about their limited sovereignty, and that they must still acknowledge that they are under the eye of their president. New Dundane, being the political capital, has no state flag of its own. Instead, it uses the default. The flag's bright blue color gives the impression that this government exists with pride. The circular element in the middle represents a generic person's head, like you and I. The flame-like pattern behind the head refers to how a post-war revolution and reconstruction atmosphere can only be achieved if every citizen is truly patriotic to their land. No city is ever truly immune to crime, and New Dundane is no exception. The city used to be notorious for its carjacking, kidnappings, murders. I was a strict warden for Gerdes' POW camps. I knew how to clean this mess up. So, it was time I took the matters into my own hands, and we figured the only real solution that would see some positive numbers is if we took as many of those bastards off the streets. So we did that, and the city of New Dundane now sees itself at record low crime rates. Wouldn't that be considered evil, though? No. I only apply such force on people who did wrong. Anyone that my police force had beaten, tasered, shot, or killed, there was a reason for that. We would do this when we knew that the criminal had done something really bad in front of an officer, including video evidence. A criminal is called a criminal for a reason. They did something that was wrong. It is my job to make sure they pay the price. And why did you choose to take this path? You know, if you give people too much freedom, they will begin to be entitled, arrogant, hypocritical, and selfish. Or even worse, they go insane and they start taking other people's lives. Before there was a death row or a life sentence, the old way was locking people at the station for like a day or two, then they get released again and continue to do some crazy thing. We've tried giving them medication, doesn't work. Raising the fines, doesn't work. Therapy sessions, you know, there was a study from a university about therapy sessions leading to a rise in crime. All these methods took over a period of like 3 years, and then the officials were getting really frustrated with me, so it was time I just locked the baddies up. New Dunedin has the largest police department in the world, all of which are under the watch of Police Chief Charles Laurier. Laurier was a former prison warden who overlooked the many prisoners of war injured as his camps. He now governs 28,000 sworn officers that patrol New Dunedin and its surrounding rural area, along with an extra 2,000 students in training. The police ideology is very strong in the capital. 19% of New Dunedin's GDP is put into policing. Other cities also have their own set of GDP, though how they spend theirs is different. Each city also contributes to help the overall military by funding for military bases in their desired region. Funding for police often goes into the construction of police-related facilities and vehicles, creation of police weapons, maintenance of pretty much everything, and of course, the paychecks that go into each and every officer on the force. So, here we are at the Police Academy. It is a very prestigious institution meant to train our future officers. This is essentially a mix of a secondary school and a military camp, where officers' lessons are divided into sitting in classrooms, learning law and verbal protocols to physical exercises. We even have a canine training place. Well, I noticed there's no actual obstacle course. You have an explanation for that? Well, it would be a waste of money to set up a few monkey bars in a tub full of makeshift mud and whatnot. Experience is the best teacher, and so it would only make sense for them to practice in places where they would actually go in on the job. There are 2 exams that officers must take before they become fully certified. The first one is, of course, about a test about laws. Now, as for the second one, this is death row, a place where criminals who have committed crimes so atrocious that the government would rather have them dead. I have personally come out of my way to ask judges to reroute the way death row executions should be handled, and instead of injection, they would be use of a physical exam. How exactly would that work? New Dunedin can be a very rough place at times. Police officers must assert dominance over anyone who would be stupid enough to go up to them. This means we have to toughen them up. A way to do this is by basically throwing an insane death row inmate in the same room as a student. The student then has to physically beat and eventually kill the inmate. As long as the death row guy ain't breathing anymore, that student is then certified. Oh dear, that is very harsh. It's called death row for a reason. Well, that method of training would stir a lot of controversy to the general public. What would you have to say about that? You do realize that people are on death row for a reason, right? Fair, but don't you feel any moral guilt? If you're asking me about opportunities to make themselves worthy in this era of generic people, they've already thrown it away. Here are all the things that every officer must have on them when on the job. Flashlight, walkie-talkie, cell phone, a notepad with pen, and a switchblade. Fully loaded 9mm handgun with extra magazines. Fully charged taser, foldable baton, pepper spray. That's a lot. Every police car also requires a fire extinguisher, toolbox, spare tire, first aid kit, and a more lethal gun with their respective magazines. Now, an assault rifle is the most common choice. The alternatives could also be submachine guns, snipers, designated marksman rifles. From what I can tell, you folks must be very focused on firearms. It would be a dereliction of duty and an embarrassment should an officer come to the scene without any weaponry. Interesting. Now, this device is a face scanner that is the most recent mandated item to have. It scans one's face, hair, clothes, and connects to the GPIT system. This helps with knowing the person we interact, interrogate, and arrest. The all-new Generic People Identification Tracker, also known as GPIT for short, is the new and improved profile management software. Every generic person in the grand country of the United Generic Nations will have their own exclusive profile. This also includes specially made haircuts and outfits made exclusively for you. Participation of this program is mandated as long as you're a citizen of the UGN Republic of Dunedin. The The GPIT system is a massive software that is intended to track and store the identity of every single generic person on the planet. More than 4,000 terabytes of storage is in this server to hold over 116 million profiles. The storage number will continue to grow as tech improves. Profiles are constantly being updated as each day passes. This is the template of a profile which stores all your information needed to be a generic citizen of this country. At the top are where your tags are, which is added or changed depending on your age, your status, or other important things in life. And why is this necessary? For the safety of the people and well-being, this system also holds their licenses, degrees, and diplomas, all of which are important. Remember, this system was launched in 1998 when we did a sudden shift from anarchism to society. Not everyone is going to listen. This will hunt the stubborn ones down. And if they don't comply, what would happen? This is mandated. You know, the UGN had a fierce military at the time, and still today. There were stories where soldiers had to drag stubborn ones out of their homes to the government buildings. A license is a permit intended to grant certain civilians a right to own something or perform an action under certain conditions and tests. A new license is often created after a terrible event has happened. The most recent one, the parenting license, was created after a group of 4 children were kidnapped by the father. Other instances include the first shooting, which prompted gun licenses, and the first car accident, which prompted driver's licenses. Licenses contain special bits of code. Sometimes they're used as makeshift keys when slotted into, say, a special slide space inside a car. As the police chief stated, the system defines us by our face, hair, and clothes. This means the hairstyle I have, the dark blue shirt I wear, and the not visible but very much present pants and shoes are stuff the machine uses to identify me. If we were to change how we looked, things would be too convoluted and confusing. It goes without saying we are all pretty much the same. There are exceptions like special uniforms while on a job. Often or not, the parents are responsible for what clothing styles their children would have. But when you are stuck with a single style your whole life, regular old fabric will not do. The clothes that are worn in modern generic people standards are actually made up of special molecules and compounds in the fabric that give it the stretching property, hence why we call them smart clothes. Where people grow, the clothes will too. They also don't rip easily. Such designs of smart clothes have rid the world of clothing stores. Smart clothes also do not require the old washing machine. In fact, every bathroom in a modern home has a special detergent body wash hybrid that cleans the person and clothes at the same time. It is a part of generic culture to set expectations for children when they are young. By the age of 5, children are expected to know basic English and begin to show signs of independence. By the age of 9, children are expected to be almost like adults and do just about anything themselves, like cleaning, homework, chores, and exercise. On a national scale, for all cities and suburbs, children are expected to walk to school. However, given the car-centric design of New Dunedin, this number is fairly low when comparing it to other cities. As for rural areas, things are different. School buses are the only option for commuting, and this comes to no surprise when areas are divided into large spaces of agriculture. However, rural life gives an environment where children grow up in a peaceful place to promote a lifestyle of exercise and serenity. And because children go through an education system of homework, it sometimes helps to ease the stress by studying in the fresh air. This is mimicked in the suburbs, where every school is surrounded by a park, which often has little forests and ponds. There are even vending machines here. And security guards. Lots of security guards. I'm quite jealous of how children thrive these days. They grow up in well-developed areas, receive the best education, and also the best entertainment. When I was a kid, I didn't even have school. I was in a cold basement trying to grow potatoes with my dad. The nation's youth revolves around self-discipline and independence, and the education system revolves around that. Start kindergarten all the way to grade 12. During this time period, a large number of assignments are to be done independently, as well as providing a constant reminder that one day everyone will grow up and have jobs and families of their own. At the end of grade 12, graduates get to choose whether to go to university, college, or apprenticeship. Tuition is often paid by student applicants themselves from various methods of their own. These post-secondary facilities are maintained by the government to ensure that nobody suffers from high fees or debt. The point of this societal structure is to make children last longer at a young age. Children often lack the proper morals and many factors affect this, like bad parenting or terrible power dynamics. Instead, everyone does things themselves. A household is healthier when nobody bothers or hurts each other. Well, sometimes teamwork is good. Yeah, in big projects where you look to a higher-up for help. That is to be expected, but don't be spoiled, don't go on power trips, don't be gullible to strangers, just don't be a gosh darn idiot. And what is your definition of idiot? The general term already explains enough. If people are constantly dependent on each other, that is dangerous thinking. Discipline means to obey the rules. Thanks to education, the police force won't have to deal with so many morons that we have to detain. But as it would turn out, no matter how good we get, some people just choose to be unproductive and lack any worth. But our 2 prison facilities work just fine. Although several police stations contain small unit cells for temporary confinement, there are really only 2 prisons that are deemed as permanent places to place the wronged and unworthy. Both places are maintained by the New Dunedin Police Department. Alcobe is the country's maximum security prison to lock up the ones who have committed crimes so bad that they have to stay here for at least a decade, forever, or on death row. The other prison, Alcoblast, is quite a peculiar location, which we will get into later. Funding to maintain takes up only 5% of the budget. However, all of that 5% goes into Alcobe prison only. The other place, Alcoblast, hardly looks like a prison at all. 6 years after Alcobe was built, we were met with fairly constant pushback from the public. We've tried to get rid of those darn protesters off the street, but just like dust, they keep coming back. Apparently they felt like Alcobe was just too brutal because it was the only prison, so we didn't really have much of a severity level system. So Mayor Spadling went to me and said, hey, we should do something about this. Now, we've tried building rehabilitation places before. It was a failed attempt the last time we tried it, but maybe something wasn't right, and Laurier realized that too. So I told Spadling, don't worry, I know a solution that is cheap, effective, and harmless. We'll give them as much freedom as they want. It'll be paradise for them. Except it wasn't paradise. Alcoblast is just a flat piece of land in the middle of a thick forest thousands of kilometers away from the nearest edge of New Dunedin's city-controlled region. The place is filled with quote-unquote inmates who wander deep into the forest, free range, doing questionable activities. No security guard or anyone from the police or military works there. Then again, who would? That place is... oh my goodness. Wow, what the actual... Honestly, I don't get the fuss. I kept my word. I haven't given anyone this much freedom since 1991. That place is like a toilet. It's disgusting, but you need it. Fact is, judges cannot send you to Alcoblast. You yourself get to choose to go there. You just need 100 generic units to buy the helicopter ticket, a suitcase with your prized belongings, and the shame. Alcoblast has gained such a notorious reputation to the point where it has a nickname called Life's Lowest Destination. It is called that because people who go there usually think they have no hope of success in any city. Usually this includes ones in poverty or fail to go to a post-secondary institution or job. The helicopter ride is a one-way ticket. Even if you had enough for a flight back, that won't really be possible. The helicopter is ordered to not land in this area, but can go low enough to drop off travelers. So, what do you have to say about flying a helicopter every now and then? Well, it's just work for us, but of course, we respect their choices. Is it tense? No, our travelers are very civilized. They don't speak much. They know what they're about to do. When I flew to New Dunedin for my position with the government, I met the other people that Jerdis hired. Daniel Barlington was one who had a really big passion for space research. Daniel Barlington is a businessman who is in a position of finances and investments. He also had ideas to look towards outer space in search of aliens. Barlington told me this idea while we were playing golf. He told me that he thinks that talking to aliens would benefit everyone. I shrugged though. It's really weird to think that because aliens, there's no proof of them existing. I didn't want to let Barlington down, but he asked me if I could help construct some kind of AI rocket ship. So I did that, but Jerdis found out what we were planning and he seized the operation. You must have thought it was crazy. Well, it did seem a bit far-fetched, but it was also far-fetched that they labeled him as insane just because he thought differently. Thank goodness he didn't go to Alcoblast, though. Today, Barlington is now head of the United Generic Nations Board of Investors, a position that doesn't have much political power considering the construct mainly comes from the dollars of taxpayers. He rarely makes any public appearances, and his influence has made him a mostly vague figure even in his own government. Lessons were learned, though. Space research will have to wait another day. Barlington usually dwells within his mansion, rarely going outside. Kether is one of the few who are still in his good graces. Hello, Daniel. Yes, Gary, what do you need? Oh, just checking on ya. It's been months since we've seen each other. Yes, I know. I mean, you haven't been doing much with your position. Anything new? Nothing out of the usual. Had to appraise a local firm recently. Nothing much. So, I never had the chance to ask you, did Jerdis ever reapprove of those ambitions? No, he's still too fantastical, apparently. He also started a space program to explore a newfound planet, though. That might be worth funding. Ah, well, you know Jerdis could really use someone like you who's so acquainted with the elites. If you ever do change your mind about joining, call me, alright? I'm still undecided, but anything for Jerdis? Heh. Are these calls usually this short? Well, yes, he's a very static person, an introvert, not an average folk. And what was this other planet that Barlington was referring to? It's a place where aliens do exist, after all. They seem to have fatter appendages and act like idiots. They probably all have 70 IQ. When children are taught about Jerdis' political journey, they often ask, why does he do some of these things? And to that we say, progress is slow when so many conflicts happen. It takes a special kind of guy to run a nation like this. To say Jerdis is a killer is simply an ignorant response. Yes, he killed, but in a place where not everyone chooses to listen, you simply have to run the extra mile to fix things. If you read the history books of various eras, you would know that before anarchism there were kingdoms and empires who were often greedy and tyrannical. As a result, life was more difficult, so you got to find that sweet spot in the middle, and this is where we are. Just everything you need to make a good, livable world is right here, and there's a lot left uncovered, but we'd be here for hours. We as a species of generic people have come far since anarchism, after many failed attempts throughout the eras. It cannot be denied that Jerdis created the biggest geopolitical change of all time, where everyone is under the watch of his powerful presence. As we've talked to the many people who currently run, take part, or were in the grand country of the United Generic Nations, we learned that this new way of living is here to stay. Some will agree that this new way is safer and better. Others will protest. But in a land where everyone's brain doesn't think the same, it helps to have one giant father figure to lead us all. And that is just how things work. A system revolving around discipline. A land built for the new era. That is the point of Jerdis' society. A generic society. Now let's see the part that was cut out.